Pennsylvania in December of 2020. We have about 50 employees. We ship yeast all over the world, and we've been, working with professional and homebrewers this entire time. So, it was a little bit of an odd, stumbling journey into where I am today. Like I said, I'm not a scientist by trade. I am fascinated by yeast, and I think now I'm like the annoying person, like I was at the brewery I started with, to like the lab and technical folks here at Imperial. I feel like I ask Alex like 700 questions a week. So he's a tough act to follow. Also, I'm like, dang, y'all had to have him on before me. That's not fair. But um, uh, I think that one of the best things about life is just being passionate about what you do, and this idea of lifelong learning, and just kind of like to absorb anything and everything that I can. So that's a little bit about me and how I got here. Yep, from bullying my now husband into teaching me how to homebrew on our third date, to being a sales manager of Imperial Yeast.
I think that's an excellent way to choose a husband. That sounds amazing to me, that like you just cornered your husband and said, "Here, show me how to brew," and that's your date. That's amazing.
Yeah, it was actually funny. So like the first date we had um was like this weird, super awkward, like blind date thing. I did not realize I was signing up for a blind date. But I got to my friend's house and they were like, I thought we were just having dinner, friend dinner. But no, it's them. They're a married couple, and Steven. And we had met kind of like at a party a few weeks prior, and like we had had a discussion about double IPAs. And he's like, "Oh, well, I make a really good double IPA." And so when I got there, he's got this like double IPA in a 2-liter bottle with a carb cap, and he's like manically just like shaking the shit out of it, right? And I didn't know anything about beer at that point, and I was like, "Oh, what are you doing?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm just carbonating my beer." And I was like, "Oh, that seems kind of like labor intensive, and there's not a whole lot of it, but whatever." Like I didn't think much of it, and like it took me like 3 or 4 years, and I like I just like suddenly had this realization. I was like, "Oh my gosh, you were forced carbonating that IPA like on that first date." It's like you were so unprepared. Anyway,
That that is an amazing story. So I'm glad to hear it was a double IPA.
yes.
Is that like y'all's bonding beer now? Do y'all like reminisce on double IPAs when you go out, or is that not something you
No,
drink
now
enough?
now it's like, no, I don't want a double IPA. I want a light beer that I can drink like two of and not, be worried about driving home.
Two of at work on a Saturday and still be able to go home to your kids and be safe.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Perfect.
So anyway, that's my origin story. About Imperial, so I touched on it a little bit. Like I said, we were founded in 2014, but didn't start actually making yeast until 2015, and that's when we started selling to professional brewers and home brewers. Um, Started pretty local. Obviously, being in the Northwest, there's so many breweries just at our fingertips, right? I mean, being in Portland, there's like, I don't know, 120 or something breweries in the metro area. And so, Owen, Jess, and Jason, through their connections through Y East, had so many friends already in the industry. And so it was really difficult at first to convince folks to swap their yeast, especially house yeast strains, for production beers over to Imperial. But because they already had these relationships established, it was a little bit easier to establish that trust that a brewery needs to have with their supplier. And so we started really small. There's a lot of word of mouth, a lot of really like organic growth. And that was like the early summer of 2015. Started packaging for home brewers in the fall of 2015, and that was the little cans that I referenced earlier. That's all I'll say about the cans. They were terrible. Uh,
Why were they terrible, Casey? Because they look
oh,
really
we all
cool.
know why. We all know why. Turns out you shouldn't put a live product that off gases CO2 into a rigid container. because it turns into a little bomb. Um, they were really fun though. We would have like competitions, go outside, shake a can, throw it at the ground, and see whose goes the furthest. Um, so it's a little bit of a wild times at Imperial in the early days, but we started packaging for homebrewers that fall, and then from there, growth just went kind of through the roof, and it was really just exponential. Every year, we grew at double digit percentages. We started in our production facility here in Portland in one room of several bays in this warehouse, and we really thought like this is going to be all the room we ever need to grow the yeast that we're going to sell. And by like the end of 2016, early 2017, it was very obvious that we needed to expand. And so started an expansion project in Portland, which really just involved getting a bigger kettle. So our original kettle, kind of, if you're familiar with the way that we prop yeast, I don't know if Alex touched on this or not, but instead of a 3 or a 4 vessel brew house, we just have a 1 vessel brew house. It's just a giant pressure cooker. So this is where we cook our media, which is just beer, low gravity, unhopped wort. And so we went from a 5-barrel kettle to a 23-barrel kettle, and then started a massive expansion project, putting in a much larger tank farm. And so now if you walk it through our facility, and if anyone's ever in Portland or Philadelphia, don't hesitate to reach out. We'd love to show you around. Always an open door here at Imperial. You can come on by anytime. But when you walk through our production facility at Portland, you go through P1, and it's got our original 5-barrel kettle. That's where we do all of our like non barley malt based media cooks these days. So gluten-free, dextrose based media. Some media trials happen on that. And then you'll see a range of tank sizes anywhere from like 2 barrels to 10 barrels in that room. And then you go over to production 2, and that's going to be a 23-barrel kettle, and tank ranges in size between 10 and 30 barrels. So a much larger tank farm, a much larger cellar in production 2. And that project was complete in sometime in the middle of 2020. And then, like I said, we opened up our East Coast facility in December of 2020. It would have been a little bit sooner had COVID-19 not just shut everything down. We had like the craziest saga out there. We signed a lease on a building, and then it was held up in permitting with the city of Philadelphia for like 9 months because we were in like a 100-year flood zone, and FEMA and the city of Philadelphia couldn't agree on some specific language in this document. And so it took like 9 months to get through permitting. We finally got permits and the go ahead to start construction on like March 5th of 2020. And then everything shut down. So it was really bad timing. But eventually that project also got off the ground, and it's been growing pretty much the same way we've grown out here in Portland, but just out on the East Coast. And so like I said, exponential growth. It's just been a really wild ride. We have really focused our energies on brewers. The majority of our products are geared toward professional and home brewers. We've got a little bit of yeast that goes out the door to sake brewers or wine makers or cider makers, but really the most part is all beer production. And then, outside of that, we've got almost 50 employees. The organization of the company is way better than it used to be. And it kind of feels like we're like all grown up and have big kid jobs these days versus the early days. But as far as what's kind of on the horizon for Imperial, as you know, we've been a certified organic brewery or not brewery, yeast lab for our entire existence. And we actually recently just dropped our organic certification. Um, Sorry, I take that back. That's not exactly what happened. We are using non-organic ingredients to propagate our yeasts these days. We're still certified organic, but um, uh, kind of expanding into conventional ingredients. And so that kind of does two things for us. One, it opens up our supply chain. As an organic yeast producer, we were really beholden to just one single producer of organic DME and one single producer of organic zinc. And it was becoming really burdensome, especially with just the ongoing supply chain issues that the entire world's facing these days. And so dropping the organic um, uh, kind of seal off of everything and using conventional ingredients opens up that supply chain, gives us more wiggle room to use different suppliers, sub ingredients when we can't get some. And then also it kind of opens the door to some really fun R&D that we didn't have access to as an organic producer. So our R&D scientists and our R&D team is now kind of starting on some fun GM products that we weren't able to do when we were still under the organic umbrella. But outside of that, really, it's just kind of business as usual. Make sure that we're giving a quality product to brewers and providing great service. You guys talked to Alex last time. He's just like the most wonderful person. He's so knowledgeable. He's our technical support lead and really just is just a wealth of knowledge. And so he's a really great resource for brewers. So we don't just provide yeast. We want to be able to be like a partner with breweries and home brewers as such as yourself, you know, like we want to be able to like answer the phone when somebody calls up and talk through a problem and troubleshoot with people and like solve it with them and be a partner and not just say, oh, well, that sounds like it's a malt problem, not our problem. Bye. So that's kind of the always been the ethos of Imperial and absolutely something that we are looking to continue to do moving forward.
So a lot to
Yeah.
unravel in a lot of that. First off, as far as organic goes, my opinion is that's more marketing than anything else.
Oh, for sure.
I think it's great that you guys are expanding your supply chain and kind of giving yourselves that flexibility because I know that that was kind of a hindrance. But focusing on brewers, I'm kind of curious about, you know, from a homebrewing perspective, like your partnership with Brewlosophy has to have been, and we're biased here, obviously, has to have been something that was kind of going that direction. So I wanted to see if you could expound upon that while you were talking about partnership with brewers and especially home brewers and your partnership with Brewlosophy.
Yeah, I mean, I first of all, I've loved working with Brewlosophy. Everyone I've ever talked with at Brewlosophy has just been really amazing, really nice people. Obviously, very passionate about beer and just really great communicators. And then Marshall, obviously, has just been wonderful since the beginning. So, uh, you know, partnership is really important to us. I think that I don't know, a lot of suppliers are like, "Hey, we sell a product and you take it or leave it." And in the beer industry, because this industry is really tight knit, it's very community oriented. People like to help each other out. Like obviously we're competitors, right? And breweries are competitors with each other, but people are constantly doing collaborations and lending ingredients and lending advice when asked. And so um, you know, in that spirit, Imperial has kind of continued um, by offering the like supplier version of that. And so, you know, we want to be able to work with breweries, not only solve problems because problems do arise. You know, fermentation is you guys know it's there's so many factors that go into fermentation and so many places that something can go wrong, and just because somebody's a professional doesn't mean they've got every you know check mark checked and every box checked and don't ever experience stalled fermentations or whatever they're experiencing. And so being able to offer like solid advice in that regard is super important to us. People need to use us as a resource. They can rely on us to help them out. And then also that kind of other like aspect of partnership, like there's that trust and like that ability to like know that we've got your back, and we're going to provide a quality product for you, and we're going to be like invested in your success. Doesn't matter if you're making 5 gallons of beer at a time or 500 barrels of beer at a time. There's still that like investment in people's success and just wanting to kind of spread knowledge and experience and passion for beer.
So is there a brewlosophy experiment that just made you super cringe, like maybe like a lager temperature experiment, or leaving it in the dryer for too long? Like, is there one that just made you cringe really hard?
Yeah, the one that I brewed with Marshall a few years back, because we talk about needing to pitch directly from the fridge, and you don't want to let your yeast sit out on the counter your whole brew day because it's gonna warm up, and then the yeast kind of comes out of that like sleeping metabolic state, and it starts chewing through its like internal sugar reserves, and then it starts really just like fermenting in its package and dying, and it really just impacts viability in a very negative way. And Marshall called me up and he was like, my parents live in Central California, and so I was like, "Hey Marshall, I'm gonna be in Central California. I'd love to swing by." And he's like, "Oh, we should brew a beer." It's like, "Okay, great, let's do it." And he's like, "We should do a brewlosophy experiment." And he's like, "I want to leave a pack of yeast out for like 2 weeks or a week or something like that, and then I'm gonna pitch it side by side with a fresh pack right from the fridge." And I was like, "Okay, Marshall." I was like, "The yeast pack that sits out is not gonna do anything. It's going to be dead." And so we made this beer and we pitched the yeast, and then we went out to like have a beer. And I kid you not, it was like 45 minutes later, we were like leaving. And we look at the airlock and both of them are bubbling. And he was just like, I knew it. He's like, "The yeast that sat out for like 2 weeks, it's just fine." And I'm like, "Oh my God, like this is not the type of PR we want, all right?"
Well, I think it just shows like the resiliency of the critters and the health of the critters that you're putting in there.
Yeah, I mean, there's that, but like, I don't want somebody being like, "Oh, well, Marshall left yeast out for 2 weeks and it worked just fine. I'm gonna do that too." Like, no, let's keep your yeast in the fridge. Treat it nicely.
Well, we should always treat them nicely, but it's nice to know that there's a little bit of slack space on either side, and
I'd say there is, yeah.
and maybe you'll make
It,
beer.
it's nice to know when I order yeast online that it coming in here at 90 degrees in Florida, it's not dead.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely recommend ice packs and like expedited shipping and doing what you can to like mitigate some of the shipping issues. But yeah, I'd also say that like the volume of yeast that we put in those packages, there's 200 viable cells at the beginning of packaging. So even if it faces some difficulties during transportation, it's likely going to be just fine.
Do you think the frozen tundra of Wisconsin or the heat of Texas and Florida is a bigger enemy?
The heat of Texas. 100%. Wow. We actually like ran some tests really early on here on frozen yeast, and we saw about like a 20 to 30-ish% drop in viability after thawing the yeast and testing viability.
Wow, only really? That's surprising.
Yeah, totally.
Because I mean, the theory is that those ice crystals are just going to puncture all those cell walls, right?
Absolutely, yep.
But apparently, I mean, and it does obviously, but that's absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Cool. So you said something about lighter beers earlier, but I kind of want to hear about your favorite beer style.
Oh, my favorite beer. I can't choose a favorite beer.
Just go styles, broad strokes.
Style? Oh, I'm just a basic. I'm a basic. I love a good West Coast IPA. That's really what I want to drink. I had a baby almost 9 months ago, and I still cannot get over West Coast IPAs. That's all I want to drink. The whole time I was pregnant, I was like, I just want a stout. And then I had the baby, and I was like, I don't want a stout. I want a West Coast IPA.
You're in the right place for it, I think.
I think so. Yeah.
Is there a favorite West Coast IPA in town that you can, or a couple of favorites? You don't have to like pigeonhole.
Yeah, I definitely have two that come to mind. One, I'm totally biased because I'm just a homer. I'm just a loyal person. But my husband, I don't know who heard this when y'all hopped on, but he recently quit his job to become a teacher, major career shift, but he was a brewer. And so he worked for Bear Lake Brewing Company here in Portland, and their Punk Rock Time IPA is one of my all-time favorite beers ever. Just a really, really fantastic West Coast style IPA. And then the second one is Von Ebert's Volatile Substance. And that's just, kind of out of this world, really, really good. Has won, I think, 2 GABF medals. And so just a really fantastic example of a West Coast IPA as well.
What's your opinion on the hazy IPA craze?
I really like some hazies. I think that, again, I prefer a little bit more bitterness and a little bit like more dryness to my beers. And so, I think a hazy can be really, really well done, especially if it's got a little bit of a bitter edge and a little bit more dryness, a little less like kind of cloying, heavy, like sticky body to it. But yeah, I mean, at first I was like, oh, what are these people doing? Like, they're putting flour in the kettle. It's like, it was insane trying to like keep haze stable in a package. It was crazy. But I think that as the evolution of hazy IPAs has kind of reached to this point, they're really great. I don't order them often, but when I do, I'm always pleasantly surprised.
So I heard that as like a rumor of people putting flour in the kettle. Do you know of brewers that were actually doing that? Because that's just...
I actually don't know.
No. I heard that was like a haze stability trick back kind of when this was
people were doing that. I know people were like storing kegs upside down and like doing the whole Widmer trick. You got a pills. That's a good label. I like that. Yeah. But
it's Hans Pills from Real Ale in Blanco. They're a great brewery.
What is the brewery?
Real Ale in Blanco, Texas.
Oh,
they're a wonderful brewery, and Hans Pills is a wonderful beer.
Love it. I like the label. But yeah, I don't know. I heard all sorts of crazy things that people were doing to keep haze in their beers. Like, y'all, just high protein adjunct malt is kind of where you want to triangulate here. Like, yeast is going to do a little bit, and like that like late addition hopping obviously is going to create some haze, but yeah.
So
yeah, there were some bad ones in the beginning.
Yeah, they were really like grayish in color. You're like, yuck, I don't know if I want to drink that.
Ugh. So I know you have some fun stuff like Capri and like juice that you're kind of like pushing towards that like hazy market a little bit. So are those kind of your top sellers during the haze craze, or what's still your number one seller, if you're allowed to tell us that?
Yeah, I would say I'll give you our 3 top sellers. It's going to be A38 Juice, A07 Flagship, and L17 Harvest.
Harvest is a great yeast. Oh my gosh, Harvest is so
English ale
good.
strain, American ale strain, and Augustiner lager. So yeah.
Wow.
And do you produce all of your yeast at both your West Coast and East Coast facilities right now, or are you just kind of picking what you do East Coast?
For the most part, East Coast is working toward having the entire catalog available through their facility, but they're getting there. And so that's the goal, is to be able to kind of mirror availability in both Portland and Philadelphia.
So you're saying that they definitely have harvest, juice, and
Definitely that. Yeah.
AO7 flagship. You're saying
Yeah,
definitely
yeah.
those.
Somebody gets fired if they don't. Not really, but sort of. Not joking.
Yeah, it would be a bad day for somebody, right?
Absolutely. There'd be questions that would be really awkward to answer. Nobody wants to answer those questions. It's better just to keep the yeast available.
So juice. What's the lineage on that one?
So it's a London 3,
Okay.
and it's the it is the Boddington strain.
Okay.
Yeah. And fun story, it originally in our catalog, it was called A38 Safari, because it was Hopworks house yeast strain. And I don't know how familiar you all are with Portland, but we're really well known for strip clubs. And Safari Strip Club was like right in front of Hopworks's brewery. And so when they banked it with us, they were like, "Can we name it?" And we're like, "Sure, of course." And they're like, "We want to call it Safari." And so that's that.
I'm really sad you changed the name now. I'm really sad.
I am not.
I think that's fantastic, because that's hilarious. That's just a great story. You can
It's a good story.
It's a great story. It doesn't make any sense other than with that story, but it's great.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Juice makes some sense. So one thing I really like about you guys is y'all are pretty open about like where your lineage comes from on a lot of your yeast. Like, I know there's some other companies that are a bit more obscure. Is that just like a choice that you guys made as a company? We're just going to be open-handed with all this, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's kind of one of our like major like guiding like ethos is transparency. You know, what we do is not really that complicated. You guys have made starters before. That's really what we do, just on a really big scale. And so there's not really any reason to keep it like under wraps and like behind closed doors. Like it's yeast. Most of the yeasts that brewers use come from breweries that we're all really familiar with. And if we've not had a beer from them, we know of the brewery. And so there's really no reason, at least for us, there's really no reason to keep information hidden. Like I said, it kind of comes back to that like partnership idea, making sure that we are as like open and honest and available with information as possible. Because at the end of the day, it's like we're making beer, and you're making beer, we're making yeast. We're not like doing anything that's saving the world. And so there doesn't really need to be a whole lot of secrecy, right? Like, yeah. I think that with like some of the proprietary stuff, like, we've got a couple of hybrid strains that we've developed in our lab, that obviously we wouldn't want somebody to, take and bank and put their name on it and sell it. And we do the same thing, kind of this professional courtesy. We don't bank somebody's proprietary strain. Some are trademarked, some are not, some have patents, some don't, but it's just kind of this like professional courtesy to not do that. So there is some of that here, but like I said, there's no reason to not give people the honest truth.
Well, especially when it's just like us home brewers that are just nerdy about the lineage and want to know where the strain comes from. Yeah, we definitely appreciate that compared to some of those other companies that keep that a little bit secretive.
Yeah.
Well, not only that, like I'm not saying all Chicos are created equal, right? Because y'all have different, a different kind of thing that you're picking out in that actual strain that you're trying to propagate, and that's great. But if I'm ordering for more beer and I can't get this Chico strain, it's nice to know that there's another Chico strain around the corner that I can order, and that makes it, as a home brewer, that's very nice. But in the same token, like if I can get my preferred brand, let's get my preferred brand of Chico.
Yeah, for sure.
Or I'm just picking on Chico because I can, but
totally. And like it's really interesting that each lab, like they're slightly different versions of the same strain. And I think like the consensus is they were banked at different times in their life cycle. And so, you know, we banked Chico at a different time than White Labs banked Chico, than Y Yeast banked Chico. And so it's all the same, you know, American ale yeast, but just slight differences.
Well, and I love that White Labs has and you don't have to comment on this, but has copied your that with their pitch pouches for homebrewers, where now they're trying to up their cell count for homebrewer. So way to be a trendsetter, guys.
Omega just did that too.
Yeah. It turns out you guys want high quality, consistent fermentations just like anybody else.
And God, I hate making starters. If I can avoid it.
It's just such an annoyance. I never, like, even when I was brewing on a regular basis, I'd be like, I'm gonna brew today. Like, I don't want to make a starter. That requires thought and planning that I don't have the capacity for.
See, and you understand that, Casey. Thank you for understanding us, because as a home brewer, you understand.
I haven't made a starter since 2018.
We're just like terrible planners. That's why we have a guaranteed in stock program for professional brewers, because most of the time a brewer will call us up and be like, so do you have a pitch of A10? And you're like, like how much do you need? Like, oh, I need 10 liters. Okay, well, when do you need it? Like, well, I'm brewing today, so can it get here tomorrow? And you're like, oh, dude. Did you really mash in without having your yeast in your hand? You did.
So it's very interesting. I'm on the Imperial Yeast website right now, and I'm noticing that somehow an L10 is showing up.
L10? Oh,
Mangoes.
No, that's I10. You're making
I10. I'm sorry. I10.
No, you're fine. So
Mangostini.
Yes, that is a brand new hybrid that's actually not even available yet. We just put it on the website yesterday, and we're announcing it at CBC. So it's a hybrid of two Kvike strains, actually.
Really?
Yeah, and it's a really fun strain. A lot of like really ripe, not overripe, but definitely like that borderline of like just on the cusp of like being like too ripe. Tropical fruit character, some lychee, a little bit of like strawberry, a little bit of like mango-ish.
Mango, I hope, based off the name.
Yeah, tiny bit of banana. So it's brand new. I think it's going to be available for purchase on June 5th. So it'll be in pouches around that date and heading out to homebrew shops. And then commercial brewers will also be available to purchase it that day. So yeah, if you want to get your hands on some, just let me know and we can make it happen.
That's really awesome. So you said it's two Kvike strains, and so are those isolates y'all already have in your catalog, or did y'all go out and explore? Or
no, they're isolates that we had in our catalog, but that we've never sold before. And I probably should have prepared slightly more than I did for this, but I don't actually know which Kvike strains are the parents. I think I see my coworker Rory on this call. Hey Rory, I'm gonna put you on the spot. Do you know which Kvike strains?
No, the log just says 2 proprietary strains, and I think one is just like Kvike K. No,
yeah, it was like K11 and K12, but that's all I know about them. So, speaking of obscurity, there you go. There's ours.
Well,
but it's not because we're intentionally being obscure. It's because I don't know.
Well, in all honesty, though, too, like the Imperialis is, again, that's your kind of proprietary stuff. So there's going to be some proprietary things happening there. So I don't really expect you to like spill all the beans. I think it's cool that you admit that it's Juice and Loki that you made a love child with for Capri.
Yeah, and that process is super cool. Just that kind of like forced sporulation and like reproduction of the yeast to create something like completely different. We actually just like about a month ago, ran sensory trials on the third round of this project, and we sampled like 6 different beers made with what Matt, our lead R&D scientist, is calling spore babies. And so he's like forcing the yeast to sporulate and then like putting them close together. And then they do their kind of like, yeast sexy time and create babies. Yeah, he fermented 6 beers. 3 of them I would never recommend anybody fermenting with ever again. But the other 3 were really good. And so there's some potential there with those 3 strains to see what comes of them.
So it's basically 2 dogs in a cage, and which one is not the redheaded stepchild?
Absolutely, yeah.
So you're 2. I mean, now
probably really like that analogy, to be honest with you.
That's perfect. I love it too. So go ahead, Haven.
So with your Imperialis project, you have Capri, obviously, which is more geared towards IPA, and now this, how do you say that? Mango steamy? I don't know, whatever. However you say that, both of those are kind of geared towards IPA. Are you looking to do more with the Imperialis project for other types of beers? Maybe like a Belgian? I don't know what you could do really with other types, but
no, unfortunately, we're a business and we've got to sell yeast, and nobody wants Belgian yeasts. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm offended right now.
I am too, to be honest. I love a good Belgian beer. One of my favorite strains of the ones that we make is B56 Rustic. It's amazing. It's delicious. It makes a fantastic beer. I love it. But the average Joe beer drinker that's drinking at all the craft breweries around the country, they don't want a Belgian beer. They want an IPA. So maybe a lager or a cold IPA strain. That's definitely been talked about. We'd like to see like a Chico strain that's actually like a high flocking variety. So you can get some nice bright beer for a West Coast IPA. So definitely some like non like super hop forward, like fruit forward IPA strains that will be coming down the pipe eventually. But yeah, the focus has really always been on what's going to sell the best, and that's IPA strains.
Makes sense.
Well, and what's so weird to me about that though, like, and it's not just you guys, but it's like, Omega and everybody else, like you're doing this crazy thing, like Omega has all their thiolized yeast strains, and you're like, well, how is this not going to get lost in the hazy somewhere? Like maybe it's layered in there somewhere, but how does this not get lost? If you put like, as a home brewer, if I put, an 8 pounds of a pound of Citra in my dry hop, like how is the thiols going to come through anywhere?
Other than you won't be able. You won't be able to see or experience them.
Like even if you did a side by side, like how are you gonna pick that out? Because that just seems, that's what's wild to me about some of this stuff. Whereas like if you had like a lager and you had something cool with some GMO thiolized stuff in that, then there should be maybe a cleanness to it that would allow some of that to come through and be kind of funky on its own.
Yeah. I mean, people are making hoppy lagers these days, like West Coast style lagers.
We're trying to help spearhead the West Coast Pills movement here at the Brü Club. So
being a lager purist, I have problems with that, but that's okay.
Well, I think it deserves its own category though, and not to hijack your strain thing, but like because it's one of those things that like it's cleaner, and like a dry hopped lager like is a different thing with like because I think I did mine with and you can tell me how to pronounce this, Hugi. Huga.
All right.
Say that 5 times fast. So Huga, and there's a different characteristic with a Huga yeast versus something like, if I would have used Flagship or Pub or something like that. So
absolutely. Yeah.
And so I think they deserve their own place, and I'm personally a big advocate of hoppy lager, but I digress.
Cold IPA. Yeah.
Yeah, hoppy lager, sure.
So are you a fan of any cold IPAs that you've had? Because I can't really tell the difference between a West Coast IPA and a cold IPA.
I have no idea what the difference is supposed to be honest with you.
Okay, I'm glad someone in the professional yeast industry agrees with me.
Yeah, I'm like, well, I mean, they're both really great, nice beers. Like,
Yeah,
I'll drink
I've never
another one.
understood that
but
either.
At first I thought it was like a Kolsch yeast that they fermented cold with basically a West Coast Pils recipe, and then I don't know, it tastes exactly the same. I don't get it.
I think there's a lot of interpretation with that style, as there was a lot of interpretation with hazies to begin with. And so some folks are using lager strains, some folks are using ale strains. You know, there's a lot of different approaches happening all over the place.
Oh, that makes sense.
Some people are using Kolsch strains. Yeah, it's kind of all over the map.
Mm-hmm.
So, not to hijack or go too far off, do you what is kind of Imperial stance on like some of the thiolized yeast strains? Is that there's genetic modification? Like, are you looking to get more into that now that you're kind of moving away from the organic label, or is it just kind of seem like a fad?
I mean, it's really cool science. It's really, really neat what they're doing with the thiolized strains and being able to kind of actively select for certain genes to promote flavor profiles and like, you know, the enzyme to promote those are like really like big white wine, you know, grape characteristics and whatnot. So it's really, really neat science. With the drop of organic, it definitely will open the door to some of the like GM stuff for us. But right now, we're not really chasing thiols. We are conducting a whole lot of research in-house on the biotransformation, like power or abilities of our current lineup. And just between you and me, A15 Independence and GO2 Kaiser are both really, really great at converting those free thiols and creating some of that biotransformation goodness that everybody's so excited about right now.
So I kind of think thiolized yeast strains, like I think that's like it's kind of cool, it's neat. I think the real thing that's fun there is like if you can get rid of diacetyl from like lager yeast strains, like to me that's where you could really do something cool.
Yeah, and there's a lab based out of Berkeley, California. They're actually called Berkeley Labs,
They're
and
great.
they've got a diacetyl free Chico, so it's pretty cool. I was super curious, and I was talking to Alex about this. I don't think anybody's done any research on this. Because like all yeast strains produce those precursors to diacetyl, right? And so like if you're turning off that gene and those precursors are not forming, like are you impacting your fermentation in any sort of like detrimental way? And I was super curious. Nobody's actually done any research on this. So I've been like seeking them out and like trying them because I'm really, really curious about this.
I always thought the diacetyl step was that like as a precursor just the alcohol. I mean, just the flavor of beer. I didn't think you could make a diacetyl free yeast that was like integral to fermentation.
Yeah.
Weird.
VDK, vicinal diketones, are the precursor to diacetyl. And they're produced by every single yeast during every single fermentation. But they don't really, as far as we know, they don't really contribute to like the overall like impact of like what a beer tastes like and smells like and like is perceived as. And so yeah, you can just turn that gene off and not have to worry about diacetyl, which is really neat.
Interesting.
Well, and I know a lot of DMS is produced during fermentation. So are there things we can do to reduce that kind of thing, or is that more of an upstream process?
I don't get the downstream process. I mean, I think that, you know, as long as you're actively like boiling for at least 60 minutes, you're reducing the amount of like DMS that's going to be produced in your beer.
Yeah, and one of the things nobody talks about with DMS is like conical fermenters are supposedly more likely to produce DMS in beers than flat fermenters on the bottom, but that's a
Oh,
different.
totally. I mean, like ester formation is also going to be impacted by like tank shape and size for sure.
Oh, that sounds like fun experiments to me. Glutton for punishment here. Cool. I have a really important question. What is your desert island beer? And while she's thinking, are there some more questions? Y'all need to throw them up in the chat, guys.
My desert island beer is Orval.
Really?
You and Vinny Trelurzo.
Really?
Yes.
Interesting.
Although, oh, you know what? Now that I say that, Rory's probably like, "What the hell, Casey? Why would you answer that?" Sierra Nevada Pale Ale is also a desert island beer. I love it so much, and I have like, I don't know. Rory's heard me talk about Sierra Nevada Pale Ale and my love for it like at least 15 times in the last like year that he's worked here. And he was like, "Oh, I haven't had it in a long time," and he was like inspired by me to go out and get it, and he enjoyed it. But so I don't know, it's a toss up between those two, because you want something that's really like easy drinking and delicious, and you know it's always going to be good and refreshing. Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. But also like Orval, it's so complex, but it's also really refreshing, and so like you wouldn't get bored.
Do you wanna know why Vinny chose Orval?
No. Yeah, why?
Because he said that because it changes flavor so constantly, you would never have the same twice.
It's a good answer.
And I'm not going to be arguing with Vinny Trelurzo because he's obviously forgotten.
I'm not going to argue with him either. Absolutely not.
He's forgotten more about beer than I ever knew. So so that I think you're the only other person I've ever heard say Orval. I've heard Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, and that's an excellent beer, and I might answer it that way as well. But
I mean, I almost always have a Sierra Nevada in my fridge. Like, it's a very rare day that there's not Sierra Nevada in my fridge.
That's some dedication. I mean, I usually get it when I need bottles for sending off to competitions because the labels come off easy and they're easy to package.
And it fits nicely on the shelf in the door in your fridge.
It does.
Slightly smaller.
It's delicious.
And it does age fairly well too. Like for being like a hoppy pale ale, like it holds up.
It's bottle conditioned, so I think that's got a lot to do with it.
I think hop choice too, because like Citra, a lot of those volatile kind of compounds will kind of fade away. Where it's like Cascade, Centennial, those kind of hops have a lot of staying power. So
absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. Come on, guys, throw up some questions. Throw them out there. You can say them out loud.
All right, I got one.
There you go.
So I worked in a commercial brewery, and I worked on a bottling line and a canning line. How does a commercial brewery's packaging system differ from Imperial's packaging system? Because I think you guys probably have to be a lot more sanitary than like a brewery has to be, right?
Yeah, I mean our like packaging for yeast is, I mean, almost exclusively done under hoods.
Really?
So under like positive pressure hoods, especially on the homebrew side, because you've got yeast that's kind of open to oxygen for a long period of time while we're filling bags and putting them through the sealer. And so yeah, our process, there's several different QC checkpoints along the way, all the way through to package. So it's definitely different. Our level of sanitization is higher than a brewery, just because we can't afford to have any sort of like microorganism contamination, because not only does that affect us and our process in our lab, but it then will affect every single brewery or home brewer that we've sent that yeast out to. And so that would be a bad day for us if we made that mistake.
Has there ever been a QA mishap? Like you went through and sent out a couple batches, and it turns out you went to lab and you saw there was something else in there. Yeah.
Oh yeah. We're
so
human.
In that case, you
We've
just
definitely
like,
messed up a few times. Once we propped what we thought was A34, which is an English ale strain for a big brewery up in Seattle. Great customers of ours, still are great customers of ours. So we propped it, thought it was A34. It was labeled A34. We went through the whole thing. We packaged it. We sent it off to them. They made like 200 barrels of beer with this A34. And then they got to sensory, and it was failing their sensory. And they're like, "Hey guys, is this perhaps A43 Loki?"
Oh no.
That's quite a
And
difference.
so yeah, we sent them A43 as A34, and they made a whole bunch of beer with it.
Was it
So
okay?
yes,
Was it drinkable?
it was drinkable. They were such great sports about it, and like, things happen. We're all human. Like, we make mistakes. That one was a really big one. But for the most part, we try to minimize anything like that to, happen ever again.
Well, and I'm sure you made it right. So that's the big
for
thing.
sure. Yeah.
So yes, the only way to catch something like that, I imagine, is just making a beer out of it and be like, oh shit.
Yeah. I mean, like, colony morphation is definitely something that we look at in our QC process, but those two colonies are really similar in size and shape. And really what we're looking for on those particular plates is like differences between like the slurry that's been plated, but it was all the same slurry. And so like the colonies looked just like the standard, ale colonies, and they didn't look any different on the plate itself. And so that it passed that checkpoint, and that was, the one place that it would have, been caught. And until it gets to a brewery and they make a bunch of beer, and then they run sensory, and they're like, this isn't right.
So is that the hardest part of your job, is handling the occasional whoops?
I think the hardest part of my job is managing FedEx's whoopses all the time.
I can imagine.
Probably the hardest part of Rory's job, that's for sure. But yeah, FedEx is just constantly messing things up for us, and we have to deal with the repercussions.
Well, Rory's here. What's Rory's official job title? Is he going to say it?
I'm customer service and inside sales.
God bless you, sir. God bless you.
And I get to deal with a whole bunch of Imperial super fans, so it's overall a pretty cool job.
That's awesome.
Steve, speak up, buddy.
Yeah, go for it.
Thank you. Hi. So, and I trust me when I say I do not mean this to come off the wrong way. My question is, I love using liquid yeast, and I love Imperial. I've been using it for years. We're not talking about it, but we should be. Darkness is one of my favorite yeasts of all time.
Yeah.
I'm a very avid stout drinker, maker. I don't care about seasonality. I will drink it in the middle of summer. I don't care. I'm a homebrewer. I can do what I want. Now, the problem is my local homebrew store won't carry it. And they're getting away from a lot of liquid yeast as a whole because the shelf life and the viability, it just goes so quick. Now, I like to consider myself an advanced home brewer. I've built the stage starter, and I've revived a 2-year-old liquid. Actually, that was an Imperial. I had it in the fridge for 2 years, and it was juice, and I revived it. Now, what was that the right choice? I don't know. But the average home brewer is not going to do that, right?
Yeah.
And I'm pretty good friends with our local guy's shop, and they're just carrying less and less yeast. So my long-winded question is, how do we avoid that when the dry manufacturers are coming out with more and more strains that they claim are comparable? And I don't know if they are. I have a hard time giving up juice. Talk about hazies. I love making I have a New England IPA that I love, and I use juice almost exclusively. But I do use verdant from quite frequently as well, because it's dry and it's a little, especially in the summertime. So how do we avoid that? And furthermore, my local homebrew shop won't carry Imperial. Like, why not?
That's a good question. I think that it's a really hard question to answer, because absolutely your local homebrew shop is totally correct. The shelf life on liquid yeast is just super short. And when you look at price point and having to ship it, via expedited shipping, and you're asking your customers to pay twice as much as a dry product, when the dry yeast companies are advertising that it's the exact same thing. It's a really hard question to answer, and honestly, I really don't have a great answer for you. I think that the advantages of liquid yeast are that you've got freshness, and viability. There's also going to be a larger quantity of viable cells, in your slurry versus non-viable, like dead cells. The QC controls are a little bit different. And then there's also, kind of this dwindling, but still something that's worth mentioning, is that, choice. And there's more choice on the liquid side than there is on the dry side. But
100%.
100%. They have a great point, and like, I don't blame anybody for wanting to, steer away from liquid yeast and stick to dry yeast, because like running a small business is really difficult, and when you're looking at that kind of landed cost, and not a high return, it's a hard prospect to make. So I think that, for you, ordering online through some of the bigger manufacturers might give you the opportunity to get some of that liquid yeast. Again, you're going to have to deal with some of the like FedEx or UPS or USPS woes of shipping in the winter and the summer, and like, trying to get your yeast before it dies. So there's that added challenge there. But, I think that if you're able to, and you can get some liquid yeast, to harvest it and store it in your fridge and build starters when you're brewing next time, is kind of your best bet in terms of being able to use liquid yeast. So yeah, it's something that we're considering. We've definitely started the process of looking into what it would take to dry yeast, and what that would look like for us as a business, and what that would do to like change our business model.
Yeah, I wonder if that's like the way a lot are trying to go because of the shelf life and stability. I mean, it seems like that has to be a natural evolution. I do love using the liquid stuff. I'm shame on me because again, this is more advanced stuff, but I'll take one package of yeast and I can turn it into 5 life cycles,
Right.
by overbuilding starters. Not that you want your general customer to know that, because you want them spending $11.99 a pack every time.
No, we're all about saving money.
Yeah.
So most commercial brewers will tell you that if it wasn't for re-harvesting yeast, that would be their most expensive thing that they buy.
Well, 100%.
So I don't think that from a home brewing perspective or a commercial perspective, they expect you to buy a new pouch every time, because that is one of the most expensive single ingredients.
It's pricey. Yeah. I mean, I can turn one $12 pack into $2.25 a batch for 5 gallon, by overbuilding.
Yeah.
But again, it's still about finding the stuff and getting it, and that's, it's tough. It's a catch-22. It's a tough situation. But
well, and I'm curious too, because there are some strains like Pub, because that's the fuller strain, right? And I love Pub. Pub is an amazing strain, but I don't see anyone putting out dried yeast for Pub, or even like the Augustiner strain, Harvest, because I can't think of anyone's doing it, because again, there has to be something with those isolates that some are more prone to that process, or more agreeable with that process than others.
Yeah.
Obviously Chico, you can dry the crap out of it.
Yeah. Some strains are far more tolerant of the drying process than others. And it's also about scale. Like when you're talking about drying yeast, you have to make it on a very, very massive scale. And so, I think companies are kind of limited by that, in that they have to choose strains that they know they're going to move a lot of yeast of.
Well, We are over an hour, so I want to be honoring of your time, Casey. If you have time to continue hanging out with us, we love chatting with you. Obviously, you're a wealth of knowledge and you're amazing. We don't expect you to go marathon like Alex did, because I know Alex had a marathon.
We put Alex through the ringer with some real in-depth technical questions, which was
Good.
it was fun.
Yeah.
And Ben just posted up like White Labs' dry yeast is like $10, which is like kind of crazy. Like, why would you? I don't know. That
Crazy.
seems
It's
kind of
really
crazy
expensive.
to me.
Yeah.
And I can get, flagship for that, or I can go get a competitor's Chico for way cheaper. That's dried as well.
Yeah.
But maybe they do something crazy good. But I do know stuff like pub. You don't really see that as a dry equivalent.
I'm trying to think. No, like SO4 is AO1 house.
What's Windsor from Lallemand? Is that the Boddington Street? No, that's
No,
Verdict.
they're.
I know they're kind of all over the board. They pick some different stuff
Okay.
and
just so we're clear, like the company I was calling out for being cryptic about what's what is kind of Lallemand. So
yeah.
I would guess that is AO1 house, because it doesn't
Windsor,
say anything
really.
about being hyperflocculent.
And it's not. It's a bitch to get to drop out and to clarify. But
Yeah, then it's definitely house.
When I use pub, I mean that stuff that drops like a rock. I don't need to do any sort of findings or anything.
Actually, the beast of pub is that like it's so flocculent that when you're trying to get it out of the stupid pouch, it's already like flocked to the bottom, and you have to keep shaking it continuously to get out of the stupid pouch.
Yeah, when we count it here at the lab, it flocks on the cell counting hemocytometer, the plate, not the plate, but the slide, and it's really, really difficult to count because of that.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, it's as far as yeast strains that you have, like Darkness, like Steve said, is amazing. Pub is also like rockstar amazing.
Yeah, it's a good one.
I think flagship's Chico. Chico's always going to be Chico, but it's overrated. Pub is fantastic.
Scott Steenberg asked, does Imperial have a German box strain? And I know why he's asking, because of his Eldorado light lager that I have booked to brew soon, because that thing won, I don't know what, 5 or 6 competitions, Steve. That thing was just killing it.
To homebrewers, we don't. If you're making a bock, I would suggest L17 Harvest. I'm trying to think if we've got a specific box strain. I don't think we do. Yeah, I would recommend L17 Harvest if you're making a bock.
Do y'all have anything from Ondex?
Yes, that's the L26 Pilgrimage.
And that's not homebrew. That's commercial only, right?
No, it's not. Yeah, just commercial. It's one of my favorite strains. My favorite lager strain that we make.
I've been to Ondex, and it's a magical experience.
Oh, I'm so jealous.
I
would love to go. Yeah.
So okay, I need to figure out how to get some pilgrimage and do some experimentation.
I think we could probably make that happen.
But the Kloster Ondex, their Doppelbock is one of the best Doppelbocks on the planet, and it's absolutely fantastic. So that's cool. Is there any plans? Speaking of this, because I know you have a lot of commercial only plans. Is there more plans to expand out your commercial down to more homebrew level, or is that just not something that's like feasible at the moment?
Right now, just what we've got is available to the homebrewers. No plans to expand that, unfortunately. I'm sorry.
Is it like, but I know you do seasonal, so like now it's
Yep.
Bueno, so is like pilgrimage possible to go on like a seasonal thing, or?
Totally. The next seasonal is going to be our I-10 Mangostini. And then after that is going to be G17 Gustav, which is a Kolsch strain. but maybe L26 over the winter.
Because I know I'm gonna mispronounce it again, even though you told me how to pronounce it. The Higgy strain was like L25 was pretty delicious. It was fun to play with.
Yeah.
So that was oh crud, what was the name of that brewery? Where did that one come from? That was
It's a Danish strain, and it's
the name escapes me. Carlsberg. There he goes.
Strain. Thank you, Rory.
Thanks, Rory. It was escaping me, but that one was like a really great strain, especially for hoppy pills.
Yeah, for hoppy pills, cold IPA, it was delicious, and it had a fun name. It means like warm, cozy, like hug in Danish. Just like really, just cute.
So, how much time do you and Rory sit around spitballing fun names for your brew products?
Very little. Although Rory, you were like peripheral to the mangostini conversation, weren't you?
I just heard about yesterday.
Okay.
Oh really?
Oh yeah.
So why mangostini though? Because like the mango, yeah, it's tropical fruity, but the stini, where does that come in?
So we wanted to name it Santorini, in themed with like Capri and Greek islands, and
okay.
But that got shot down. And so mangosteen is a fruit, like this South Asian fruit, I think it is, tropical, kind of like these like really soft, like tropical banana, strawberry kind of characteristics. So those words came up a few times in our tasting notes, and so I'm like, oh, mangosteen sounds like a fun name. And then somebody was like, well, we got to call it mangostini. And then there was a lot of jokes about tropical martinis being called mangostinis, and it just stuck. So there you have it. That was like the genius marketing conversation.
It's no safari story. That's all I'm going to say. It's no safari.
No, it's no safari.
I do like the Greek Isles one. I mean, you'll get a Mykonos in there somewhere, but
Casey, do you ever have plans to go back and start homebrewing again once the little ones are a little bit older?
Oh, totally. Yeah, now that my husband doesn't work in a brewery anymore, like beer's expensive.
Oh hell yeah.
So yes, definitely one of these days. But I'll probably make him homebrew because he's way better homebrewer than I am.
Well, as long as you have a keg of beer on tap, that's however you get it, that's fine.
Right. Yeah, and I think the little ones would actually enjoy the process. My 3-year-old loves helping to cook, so I'm sure he'd be super into like pouring hops in and helping stir and doing some of the stuff that doesn't involve him, like, falling into a boiling pot of wort and whatnot.
Mine really like to measure stuff out. So it's like the grain, if they can dump it in the grain mill and make the drill go crazy, that's their thing, and they make a giant mess.
Okay.
Be careful.
I'll keep that in mind. That sounds like it'd be right up his alley.
You're gonna miss some starting gravities on some of that if you let your kids mill your grain. FYI.
Yeah. And then I'm just like the type of homebrewer that's like, I'm just not going to take a gravity reading. I'm a terrible. Don't ever follow my advice. That's just all I got to say.
You're just like, it'll make beer. It's fine.
It'll be okay.
And then also like the scales, because like the digital scales look different with the numbers. And so my kids loved like seeing the weird different numbers. Now make sure you measure all of your like water chemistry stuff separately, right? Because like your calcium chloride will be off and you will have to adjust it because it's going to be like 10 grams over what you wanted. But you can always scale back as long as you're not mixing it in with the gypsum that you just measured out. So
we have my like kids the calcium chloride for the kids and the real calcium chloride for the brewing.
my daughter loves after preschool every day I pick her up. She's like, Dad, have you gone to homebrew store today? I was like, no, I don't need any beer today. She like announces it as she comes out of the classroom. Going to the homebrew store?
And honestly, get your kids involved in naming these yeast strains, because honestly,
Probably.
kids have the best names. My daughter named a whole fruited sour. No, my son Rainbow Duck, because he was trying to tell me how rainbow ducks weren't real, and I'm like, no, they're not. But that sounds like a fruited sour
like
that
a
I
good
should
name.
make.
Yes, absolutely.
Rainbow Duck.
He definitely knows about beer. We were at the grocery store the other day, and he was handing us cans, and he kept going, "Here, Daddy, here's your beer," and he was handing us cans of food. No, we look like really good parents here in the grocery checkout line.
I keep seltzer water on tap, and I'm teaching my daughter how to pour me some beers with that. It's training. It's good training.
It is good training. A solid pro tip there.
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. All right, what else do we have for Casey? Otherwise, I want to really honor our time, because I have one more question, but I want to make sure everybody else has questions answered, because I don't want to take up too much of her time. I'm happy to consume it if she doesn't have anywhere to be and just wants to sit here and drink beer with us, because we're just such rad people, obviously.
I'm out of beer, unfortunately.
Okay, well, definitely we got to wrap this up then. So we've talked to like Brian from Lallemand and some other folks that like have been really good to us, and it seems like, as far as like you talked about community with beer, it does seem like the yeast manufacturers are kind of a big family too. Like you said, like a lot of your people came from Y Yeast, and it seems like y'all are all on pretty good terms with everybody else. And so I just wanted to like kind of have you expound on like that. Yeast just seems like it's a family. Obviously, you're competing. You want to stay in business, but there seems like there's a lot of market out there so that everybody can kind of have their own slice of pie.
Totally. And I think everybody kind of has their own niche in terms of what they offer and what kind of focus and services they can provide to breweries. And yeah, I mean, it's really hard to be super competitive with another yeast lab when you're going to a conference and you're going to drink a beer with them and you're going to talk about beer. And like, we all got into beer because we were passionate about it and we loved it. It's not because we're all making millions of dollars over here in the beer industry. And so I think that that at the end of the day, like, yes, we are competitors, and yes, like we are running our businesses and we want to be successful and we want to I love winning, don't get me wrong. I'm like hyper competitive and always want to win, but also like we are in this industry because we like the product and we like the people that make it and the people that drink it, and we want to see it do really well. And I think that there's a line that's like, a rising tide raises all ships, and then there's also the owner of the Horse Brass used to say this all the time: it's not about the beer, it's about the beer. And I think that's a really like profound statement, and something that like we all need to remember.
I think that's awesome, because again, like what Brian and Lallemand are doing are very different from what you're doing, and obviously what Berkeley's doing is going out there and doing some things that not everyone else is doing. And so it seems like, as long as you're all passionate and putting out a great product and like everybody's getting what they need, like I think it's awesome.
Absolutely.
So,
but I do like to win, so.
Well, I think, again, as Rory said, lots of Imperial love here. Like, nobody said anything hateful. We wish we could get some strains more year round, but whatever.
Hey, now somebody, two people. You could probably just like nudge.
It's like I know a gal, or I know a guy, I know a gal. It's all good.
Yeah, you got an in.
So yeah, and I'll just make Marshall email you. That's way easier for me.
I can't say no to Marshall.
I know Eben. I'll just send him another email. I'm sure he's always pleased when he sees my name come into his inbox. I keep him busy.
No, but
I was texting with him just before we hopped on, and he said he's at a Derby show, a Derby party.
Kentucky Derby party.
Right?
What's that?
Yeah, I think it's already ran. Kentucky Derby already ran, though.
Oh yeah,
yeah. It ran right when we started. So.
Oh.
Who won? Does anybody care?
Fuck no. I had a cocktail, and that was my extent of derbiness.
You had your You had your mint julep, except for
that
they're
was
not
about
that
it.
good. They're not that good. It's fine.
Hey,
really
I like whiskey, mint, and sugar.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that.
Delicious.
Good.
I'd much rather have a gin and tonic, but that's just me.
Well, I would too.
Yeah, me too.
I make my own tonic syrup as well. So, anyways, cool. Well, Casey, we're happy to have you hang out. We may sit here and drink. I have at least this much of a Sierra Nevada inspired by you left to drink, so I'm quite happy to sit here and drink it. But you're out of beer, so I don't really want to keep.
Yeah, I should probably get running. Go have dinner with my family. It was really, really wonderful talking to you all. If you ever have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'm just Casey at imperialyeast.com. Alex, you can answer, or you can shoot a question to Rory. Rory's rory.s@imperialyeast.com. Literally, like anytime you guys have questions, concerns, want to run something past us, don't hesitate to reach out. If you're ever in Portland or in Philly, swing by the lab. We'd love to show you around.
Well, I personally am very grateful for your partnership with not just Velocity, but the Brü Club and what you guys are doing out there for the yeast industry. Obviously, I think most of us here share the sentiment that you guys have a great product. Y'all do a great job, and we really just appreciate you guys. So thank you for spending the last hour and a half with us. I really do appreciate it. I know you're spending time away from your family, so thank you so much, Casey.
Thank you. Y'all have a good one, okay?
Inside Rory.
Thanks a lot, guys. It was fun.
Bye.
Side
Thank
Rory.
you.
Side Rory there. Rory, you can hang out too, man. You look like you're at home. Go grab another beer.
Bye,
I
everybody.
got to get going,
You
but I hope to see you guys again.
Thanks, man. Have a good one.
Cheers.
Thanks, Rory. All right, I'm out. I'm gonna go help the kiddo get to bed.
Everyone's out. Y'all, come on, guys. I'm turning
I
off the
know,
TV now.
I'm sorry. I'm sure